The emergency lights cast red shadows across the communication center as the final message from Earth played for the third time. Static crackled through the speakers, mixing with the voice of Admiral Hayes, the last commander of Earth's defense fleet. His words were clear despite the interference. All remaining human forces, this is command. We have lost. I repeat, we have lost. All ships are ordered to surrender immediately. Do not throw away more lives for a lost cause. The transmission ended with a burst of static. Then silence filled the room aboard the UES Defiant. 200. Crew members had heard those words, and now they waited for their captain to make the choice that would decide whether they lived or died in the next hour. David Cross felt the weight of every pair of eyes in the room. The war against the hegemony had lasted 3 brutal years. 7 alien species had joined together with one goal: wipe humanity from the galaxy. They called humans a disease, a species too violent and unpredictable to be allowed among the stars. One by one, human colonies had fallen. The great shipyards of Mars were nothing but debris now. The mining stations of the Outer Rim had gone silent weeks ago. "Sir, the other captains are requesting orders," said Lieutenant Emma Walsh. Her voice was steady, professional, but Cross could hear the fear underneath. They all knew what surrender meant. The hegemony did not take prisoners. They had made that clear from the very first battle. Cross walked to the main viewing port and looked out at space. 17 human ships hung in the darkness around them, all that remained of the once mighty colonial fleet. Beyond them, the massive forms of hegemony warships waited like predators. Their sleek alien hulls reflected the distant light of Tau Ceti, the star that had once promised humanity a new home among the colonies. The captain of the nearby cruiser Horizon was already broadcasting surrender codes. Cross watched as the Yaik ship powered down its weapons and shields. One by one, the other vessels followed. The captains had made their choice. They would trust in hegemony mercy, even though everyone knew no such mercy existed. "Captain Cross," the voice came over the communication channel. It was Captain Morris from the destroyer Phoenix. "We're waiting for your signal. Are you ready to transmit surrender?" Cross closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about his daughter back on New Terra, probably dead now like everyone else on that world. He thought about the thousands of human children who would never grow up, never see the stars, never know what their species might have become. The logical choice was clear. Surrender would buy them maybe a few more hours of life. Fighting would guarantee death in minutes, but something deep inside him refused to accept it. "Negative, Phoenix," Cross said into his communicator. "The Defiant will not surrender." Silence filled the communication channel. Then Captain Morris spoke again, his voice confused. "David, what are you saying? You heard the orders. It's over." "It's over when I say it's over," Cross replied. He turned to face his bridge crew. They stared at him with a mixture of fear and something else. Hope, maybe, or just the desperate desire to go down fighting rather than begging. "Lieutenant," Walsh stepped forward. "Sir, if we fight, we all die. You know that, right?" "Yes," Cross said simply. "But if we surrender, we all die anyway. At least this way, we die as humans." The young officer nodded slowly. Around the bridge, other crew members began to straighten up. The fear was still there, but it was being pushed down by something stronger, pride perhaps, or just the stubborn human refusal to go quietly. "All hands, this is the captain," Cross announced over the ship's communication system. "I'm giving everyone a choice. We can surrender and hope for mercy we know won't come. Or we can fight and show these aliens what humans are made of. Anyone who wants to leave can take the escape pods now. No shame in choosing to live." He waited. Minutes passed. Nobody moved toward the escape pod stations. "Well then," Cross said, with the first smile he'd felt in weeks. "Let's show them what one human ship can do." The Hegemony Fleet Commander General Thex received the transmission with something like amusement. His translator device rendered the human words into his own language. "General Thex, this is Captain Cross of the UES Defiant. We reject your offer of surrender. If you want this ship, come and take it." "Interesting," Thex said to his bridge crew. The Dominion species prided themselves on logic and efficiency. This human response made no sense. They must know they cannot win. Perhaps their primitive minds cannot process the reality of defeat, suggested his tactical officer. Shall we destroy them quickly and be done with it? Thex considered this. The other human ships had already surrendered and been taken into custody for processing. Only this one vessel remained defiant. It would be simple enough to destroy it, with a single volley from the dreadnought's main guns. But something about the humans had always puzzled him. They fought with a fury that seemed to ignore mathematics and logic. Even when facing impossible odds, they kept fighting until the very end. It was inefficient, but it had cost the hegemony more ships than they had expected. No, Thex decided. Send in the fighters first. Let us see what this defiant can actually do before we end this game. Aboard the human ship, alarms began to sound as enemy fighters launched from the hegemony carriers. Chief Engineer Tom Rivera looked up from his console in the engine room. Captain, we're seeing multiple fighter squadrons inbound. Estimate 60 craft. Acknowledged, Cross replied. All stations battle ready. Weapons free. The Defiant had been built as a heavy cruiser, designed for deep space patrol and colony defense. It carried powerful shields and weapons, but it had never been intended to face an entire enemy battle group alone. The odds were impossible, but the crew went to work with calm efficiency. Sir, called out Gunnery Sergeant Kelly Price from the weapons station. I'm seeing something unusual. In their fighter formation, they're not taking us seriously. They're flying like this is going to be easy. Cross smiled grimly. Then let's educate them. The first wave of alien fighters came in fast and confident. The Defiant's point defense guns opened up, filling space, with deadly accurate fire. The enemy had expected quick surrender or quicker destruction. They had not expected to fly into a wall of precisely aimed death. 3 fighters exploded in the first seconds, then 6 more. The remaining craft scattered in confusion as the human ship's guns tracked them with deadly precision. These weren't the weapons of a defeated enemy begging for mercy. These were the guns of warriors who had nothing left to lose. The first explosion lit up the darkness like a small sun. Lieutenant Walsh watched through the tactical display as alien fighters scattered in all directions, their tight formation broken by the unexpected fury of human weapons. 3 more enemy craft vanished in brilliant flashes of light and debris. They didn't expect us to bite back, she said with grim satisfaction. Captain Cross nodded as he studied the battle display. The hegemony had sent 60 fighters against them, probably expecting to overwhelm the Defiant with sheer numbers. But the alien pilots had flown in like they were attacking a helpless target, not a warship crewed by desperate humans. Chief Rivera, Cross called down to engineering. How are our power levels? Running hot, Captain, came the reply over the intercom. But I've got some ideas that might interest you. Permission to try something crazy? Cross almost laughed. Everything about their situation was crazy. Granted, do whatever it takes. In the engine room, Tom Rivera was already working on modifications that would have horrified any safety inspector. The fusion reactor was designed to run at 100% capacity maximum. Rivera was pushing it to 140%. The particle accelerator system that powered their main weapons had never been meant to channel this much energy. The chief engineer was feeding it power levels that should have caused a catastrophic overload, but somehow, impossibly, it was working. Sir, Gunnery Sergeant Price called from weapons control. I'm reading power surges across all systems. Whatever the chief is doing down there, our guns are hitting twice as hard as they should. The second wave of fighters came in more carefully, having learned to respect human weapons. But the Defiant was no longer the same ship it had been minutes before. Rivera had turned their exploration vessel into something entirely new. A warship pushed beyond every safety limit, held together by engineering skill and desperate determination. The modified particle beams cut through space like swords of light. Each shot that connected with an enemy fighter resulted in total destruction. The aliens had armor and shields designed to handle normal weapons fire. They had no defense against guns that were running at double their intended power output. Captain, Walsh said, her voice tight with disbelief, we're winning. It seemed impossible, but the tactical display confirmed it. The fighter attack had been beaten back. Debris from destroyed alien craft drifted through space around the Defiant. The human ship had taken damage, hull breaches on 3 decks, shield generators running at 60%, but they were still fighting. General Thex stared at his own tactical display with growing anger. A full fighter squadron, reduced to scattered survivors by one human vessel. His tactical officer looked nervous as he delivered the damage report. 60 fighters deployed. 37 destroyed or disabled. The remaining craft are retreating to carrier range. How is this possible? Thex demanded. Their ship should have been destroyed in the first attack. Sir, our intelligence may have been incomplete. This vessel appears to be more heavily armed than our projections indicated. Thex's species did not believe in emotions like rage, but he was experiencing something very close to it. The other hegemony commanders would hear about this failure. His reputation for efficient extermination of inferior species would be questioned. Bring the destroyers forward, he ordered. If fighters cannot handle one human ship, we will use proper warships. 4 hegemony destroyers moved out of formation, their sleek hulls bristling with weapon ports. Each one was larger than the Defiant, with more advanced shields and armor. Against any normal opponent, it would have been massive overkill. But the Defiant was no longer normal. Rivera had found new ways to channel power through systems that were never meant to handle such energy loads. The waste recycling system had been converted into a torpedo launcher. The main deflector array, designed for pushing debris out of their path during hyperspace jumps, was now focusing their particle beams into concentrated death rays. Incoming. Destroyers, Price reported. 4 ships closing fast. Target the lead vessel, Cross ordered. All weapons, maximum power. The Defiant opened fire with everything it had. Beams of pure energy, torpedoes made from converted waste materials. Even the navigation laser had been weaponized by Rivera's increasingly desperate modifications. The alien destroyer took the full force of the barrage directly on its forward shields. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the enemy ship's shields collapsed in a shower of sparks. The destroyer's hull, designed to withstand normal weapons, fire, cracked open like an egg under the impossible energy output of the human ship's modified systems. The alien vessel exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the entire battlefield. "One down," Walsh announced, but her voice was strained. "Captain, we're taking heavy return fire, shields down to 30%. We've got major damage on decks 5 through 8. Cross could hear the sounds of battle throughout his ship. Emergency alarms were sounding. He could smell smoke from damaged systems, but they were still fighting, still making the enemy pay for every shot they fired. "Sir," came Rivera's voice from engineering, "I don't know how much longer I can keep these modifications running. We're one power surge away from a complete system failure." "Just keep us fighting, Chief," Cross replied. "That's all I ask." The remaining 3 destroyers had learned caution from the fate of their companion. They spread out, attacking from different angles to prevent the Defiant from concentrating its fire. Alien plasma beams hammered the human ship's shields, causing explosions throughout the vessel. But the crew kept working. Damage control teams raced through smoke-filled corridors to repair broken systems. Medical teams treated wounded crew members in corridors because the main sickbay had been destroyed. Everyone who could still move was contributing to the fight in some way. "Captain," Price called out, "we've got a problem. The lead destroyer is moving into position to ram us." Cross looked at the tactical display. The alien ship was indeed changing, course abandoning weapons fire in favor of a direct collision. At their current speed, impact would occur in less than 2 minutes. "Can we outrun them?" he asked. "Negative," Walsh replied. "Our engines are running on auxiliary power only." Cross made a decision that would have been called insane by any military academy. "Chief Rivera, can you give me one more miracle?" "What do you need, Captain?" "I need you to overload the main reactor, not just push it past safety limits. I need you to make it ready to explode on my command." There was silence from engineering for a long moment. Then Rivera's voice came back, steady and determined. "Understood, Captain. Give me 30 seconds." The alien destroyer rushed toward them like a missile, its hull gleaming in the starlight. Cross watched it approach and waited for Rivera's signal. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency, even though they all knew what was about to happen. "Reactor overload ready, Captain," Rivera announced. "On your command, we'll have about 10 seconds before total containment failure." Cross waited until the enemy ship was almost on top of them. Now, the Defiance reactor went critical, just as the alien destroyer made contact. The explosion that followed could be seen from the other side of the star system. The miners on Babel 7 stopped working when the news reached them. For 3 years, they had kept their heads down and pretended to be grateful for the protection of their hegemony overseers. The alien supervisors treated them like animals, forcing them to work 16-hour shifts in dangerous conditions while barely providing enough food to keep them alive. But now, something had changed. "Did you hear?" whispered Marcus Webb, a former engineer from the colony on Kepler. He spoke quietly as he worked, not wanting to attract attention from the guards. "One of our ships fought back, the Defiant. They took out 2 destroyers before going down." The woman working next to him, Lisa Park, looked up from her mining equipment. "You sure about that? Sounds too good to be true." "I heard it from the communication tech," Marcus insisted. "The aliens are trying to keep it quiet, but word is spreading. That human ship didn't just fight, it won battles. Made the hegemony bleed." Around the mining platform, other workers began to slow their pace as the whispered conversation spread. 300 humans labored in the asteroid belt, supposedly under the protection of the hegemony after their colonies had been destroyed. In reality, they were slaves, working to extract valuable minerals that would help build more alien warships. The hegemony supervisor, a tall creature from the Nexus species, noticed the decrease in productivity. It approached the human work area with the mechanical precision typical of its kind. "Work efficiency has decreased by 12% in the last 30 minutes, it announced through its translation device. "Explain this reduction immediately, Marcus." Webb looked up at the alien overseer. For 3 years, he had avoided eye contact, spoken only when spoken to, and tried his best to be invisible. Today felt different. Today, he remembered that he was human. "We're tired," Marcus said simply. "We need better food and longer rest periods." The supervisor's mechanical voice showed no emotion, but its posture suggested surprise. "You are questioning work protocols? This is unacceptable behavior." "Is it?" Marcus stood up, his mining tool still in his hands. "Because from what I hear, some humans are doing more than questioning. Some are fighting back." Around him, other workers began to stop what they were doing. Lisa Park set down her equipment and stood beside Marcus. One by one, the entire human work crew abandoned their tools and faced the alien supervisor. The supervisor activated its communication device, calling for security reinforcements. But something was different in the way the humans stood. They no longer looked like broken people grateful for their lives. They looked angry. On New Geneva, a trade station in neutral space, the news had a different but equally powerful effect. Human merchants who had been paying protection money to local crime bosses suddenly found their courage. Amy Chen, who ran a small cargo business, walked into the office of the hegemony trade representative and threw a bag of credits onto his desk. "What is this?" the alien official asked. "It's your protection money," Amy said. "All of it. I'm done paying." The official, a member of the bureaucratic collective species, checked his records. "Your account shows regular payments for 36 months. Why are you terminating this arrangement?" Amy smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Because I just remembered what my species does to people who try to extort us. We fight back. And apparently, we're pretty good at it." Similar scenes played out across dozens of systems. Human refugees who had been hiding their identity began to speak their native language openly. Underground resistance cells that had been broken and scattered started making contact with each other. The story of the Defiant spread through channels the hegemony couldn't monitor. Whispered conversations, coded messages, and the kind of communication network that emerges when people decide they've had enough of being afraid. But the most important audience for the news was not on any station or planet. It was scattered across space in emergency shelters, refugee ships, and hidden bases. These were the survivors of destroyed colonies, the remnants of military units, the families who had lost everything but their lives. Commander Sarah Torres, Admiral Torres's daughter, received the transmission in the cargo hold of a converted freighter somewhere in the Veil Nebula. 200 survivors from 6 different colonies were crammed into a space meant for freight, living on recycled air and emergency rations. The message came through on an old military frequency, transmitted by someone brave enough to risk detection. This is Free Channel 7. We have confirmed reports that the UES Defiant engaged a full hegemony battle group in the Tau Ceti system. The ship fought for over 4 hours against impossible odds before being destroyed. Enemy losses include 2 destroyers and multiple fighter squadrons. The Defiant's crew of 200 died fighting, but they proved something important. We can still hurt them. Sarah looked around the cargo hold at the faces of her people. Children who had watched their homes burn, parents who had lost everything, soldiers who had been told to surrender. For months they had been running, hiding, trying just to stay alive. "Did you hear that?" she asked quietly. An old soldier named Jack Murphy looked up from where he was teaching some of the children how to maintain a rifle. "Heard it, Commander. 200 people made the whole hegemony pay attention." "More than that," Sarah said. "They reminded the galaxy that we're still here, still fighting." She stood up and looked around the cargo hold. "I know we've been running, I know we've been hiding. But maybe it's time to stop. Maybe it's time to remember what Captain Cross and his crew just showed everyone." "What's that?" asked Dr. Helen Wade, the colony medic who had become their unofficial leader. "That humans don't go quietly," Sarah replied. "That we make them pay for every victory. That even when we're outnumbered 1,000 to 1, we can still make them bleed." The children stopped playing and listened as the adults began to talk. Not about where to hide next, but about where to strike back. The conversation went on for hours, and by the end of it, the refugee ship had become something else entirely. It had become the first ship of a new human resistance fleet. Across the galaxy, in hidden bases and refugee camps, in mining stations, and trade posts, the same conversations were taking place. The news of one ship's defiant last stand was spreading faster than the hegemony could contain it. And with that news came something the aliens had thought they had destroyed completely: hope. The hegemony had made a crucial mistake. They had assumed that destroying human worlds and fleets would break human spirit. They had not understood that humans, when pushed to the edge, do not break. They become dangerous. General Thex, reviewing the damage reports from the Battle of Tau Ceti, was beginning to understand this truth. But by then, it was already too late to stop what the Defiant had started. The emergency session of the Hegemony Council convened in the Great Chamber on Dominion Prime, the capital world of the Alliance. 7 species had gathered 3 years ago with one simple goal: eliminate the human threat from the galaxy. Now, for the first time since the war began, there were cracks in their unity. "Explain to me," said Counselor Vex of the Terminus species, "how one primitive human vessel managed to destroy 2 of our destroyers and escape." General Thex stood before the assembled representatives, his confidence shaken for the first time in his military career. "The human ship did not escape, Counselor. It was destroyed in the engagement." "After causing unacceptable losses," Counselor Vex replied coldly. "Our intelligence indicated that human resistance was broken. Your reports assured us that their remaining forces would surrender without significant combat. The situation has become more complex," Vex admitted. "The actions of this single vessel appear to have had unexpected consequences. We are receiving reports of renewed human resistance activities across multiple systems. Around the council chamber, representatives from 7 different species exchanged glances. The war was supposed to be over. Human colonies had been destroyed, their fleets scattered, their government eliminated. The remaining survivors should have been easy to process through the extermination protocols. Instead, they were fighting, back with renewed fury. "Show us the tactical analysis," demanded Counselor Rex of the collective. "We need to understand how a single ship could have such impact." The chamber's main display activated, showing the battle in the Tau Ceti system. The counselors watched as the small human vessel fought against impossible odds. taking damage that should have destroyed it multiple times while continuing to return devastating fire. Notice the power output readings, Thex explained. The human ship was operating all systems far beyond safe parameters. Their weapons were producing energy levels that should have been impossible for a vessel of that size. Are you saying they have new technology? Asked Counselor Nix of the Synthesis Union. Not new technology, Thex said carefully. They were using existing equipment in ways that violated every safety protocol. Their chief engineer essentially turned their exploration vessel into a weapon of mass destruction by removing all safety limitations. Counselor Vex leaned forward. You mean they were willing to destroy their own ship to fight us? Yes. And, when faced with certain defeat, they used their reactor as a weapon, taking one of our destroyers with them in the explosion. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The hegemony had fought many species during their expansion. Across the galaxy, some had surrendered quickly. Others had fought conventional wars and been defeated by superior technology and numbers. But none had ever demonstrated this level of desperate determination. This is why we must accelerate the extermination process, said Counselor Czar of the Keo Nexus Empire. The longer we allow human survivors to exist, the more dangerous they become. But Counselor Vex raised a different concern. The broadcasts from this battle have reached neutral territories. The Independent Worlds Alliance is asking questions about our conduct in this war. Several species are expressing concern about our methods. This was the real problem, Thex realized. The hegemony had always maintained that humans were uniquely violent and dangerous, a species that threatened galactic peace. But the footage of one small ship fighting against overwhelming odds was being interpreted differently by neutral observers. They saw courage, not violence. Determination, not aggression. Sir? Thex's aide interrupted the council session. We have urgent communications from the field. Multiple human resistance cells have become active across the sector. The main display shifted to show tactical reports from a dozen systems. On Babel 7, human workers had overpowered their guards and taken control of the mining station. On New Geneva, human merchants had formed an armed coalition and were refusing to pay protection taxes. Most seriously, intelligence suggested that scattered human survivors were beginning to coordinate their activities. This is unacceptable, Counselor Rex declared. Deploy additional forces immediately. Crush these uprisings before they can spread further. Sir, the aide continued nervously, there is another complication. We are detecting ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of multiple systems. They appear to be vessels from neutral territories. The council chamber's attention focused entirely on this new development. Neutral powers had stayed out of the human hegemony war, neither helping nor hindering either side. If they were now deploying ships, it could mean only one thing. They were coming to investigate. Admiral Ross of the Cathera Republic fleet materialized as a hologram in the center of the council chamber. The Cathera were one of the most powerful neutral species, and their opinion carried significant weight with other independent worlds. Counselors of the hegemony, Ross said with formal politeness, we are responding to reports of unusual military activities in sectors under our observation. We request clarification of recent engagements involving human vessels. Counselor Vex spoke for the Alliance. Admiral Ross, we appreciate your concern, but this is an internal matter. The human species poses a threat to galactic stability, and we are acting to contain that threat. We have reviewed the tactical data from the engagement at Tau Ceti, Ross replied. The conduct of your forces raises questions about compliance with galactic warfare protocols. Specifically, the deployment of planet-cracking weapons against a single vessel appears to violate several treaties. Thex felt his blood run cold. The hegemony had indeed prepared to use planet-killing weapons against the Defiant in the final moments of the battle. Only the ship's destruction had prevented their deployment, but the weapons had been detected by long-range sensors. Admiral, Counselor Rex said carefully, those weapons were not used. But they were prepared for use, Ross countered, against a single ship. This suggests either gross incompetence in your military planning or deliberate escalation beyond reasonable force levels. Around the council chamber, the representatives began to understand the scope of their problem. The hegemony had always justified their war against humanity by claiming that humans were uniquely dangerous. But now, neutral observers were seeing a different story. They saw a powerful alliance using overwhelming force against a nearly extinct species. They saw planet-killing weapons being prepared for use against a single ship. Most importantly, they saw that single ship fighting with desperate courage against impossible odds. We will be deploying observer fleets to monitor ongoing military operations in this sector, Admiral Ross announced. Any further use of weapons designed for planetary destruction will be considered a war crime under galactic law. The hologram faded, leaving the council chamber in tense silence. For the first time since the war began, the hegemony faced the possibility of intervention by neutral powers. The simple extermination campaign had become a diplomatic crisis. What are your recommendations, General? Counselor Vex asked. Thex considered his options carefully. The military situation was becoming more complex by the hour. Human resistance was spreading, neutral powers were watching, and the story of the Defiant had somehow transformed a defeated enemy into a symbol of courage that was inspiring other species to question hegemony actions. We have three choices, he said finally. We can escalate our efforts and risk galactic intervention. We can negotiate some form of settlement with human survivors. Or we can attempt to contain the situation while managing the diplomatic consequences. Negotiation is not acceptable, Counselor Czar stated firmly. The human threat must be eliminated completely. Then we must be prepared for the consequences, Thex warned. Because one thing has become clear from the Battle of Tau Ceti: humans do not surrender quietly, and apparently the galaxy is beginning to notice. The shipyard floated in empty space, hidden in the shadow of a dead planet that had once been home to 3 billion humans. Admiral Rebecca Torres walked through the construction bays, watching as humans and aliens worked side by side to build something that shouldn't have been possible. The UES Defiant II was taking shape, and it was beautiful. The Cathura engineers finished installing the shield generators this morning, reported Captain Emma Walsh, now Torres's chief of staff. The Centauri Union provided the hull plating. Even the Free Traders Guild sent supplies. Torres nodded as she studied the construction reports. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Tau Ceti, and the galaxy had changed in ways none of them could have predicted. The story of one ship's refusal to surrender had spread far beyond human space, inspiring not just human resistance but something much more powerful. It had inspired other species to examine what the hegemony was really doing. Any word from the investigation committee? Torres asked. They released their final report yesterday, Walsh replied, handing over a data tablet. The Galactic Tribunal found the hegemony guilty of 17 violations of interstellar warfare protocols. More importantly, they've ruled that humans pose no unique threat to galactic peace. Torres smiled as she read the report. The neutral powers had done more than just investigate. They had examined 3 years of hegemony propaganda about human violence and aggression, then compared it to actual evidence. What they found was a species that fought fiercely when attacked, but had never initiated aggressive wars against their neighbors. The hegemony had been exposed as the aggressor, not the protector of galactic peace. Ma'am, interrupted a young communications officer. We're receiving a transmission from the Babel system. Commander Sarah Torres reports that the mining stations are now fully operational and producing materials for the fleet. Good, the Admiral replied. And New Geneva? The trade hub is back under human control. The merchants have formed a defense alliance with several neutral worlds. They're calling it the Free Commerce Zone. Torres walked to the observation deck and looked out at the construction happening around them. Dozens of ships were under construction, not just human vessels, but joint projects with other species who had decided they didn't want to live under hegemony rule. The war had created something nobody had expected. It had created a coalition. Admiral, called out Chief Engineer Tom Rivera, approaching with obvious excitement. You need to see what the Synthesis Union just sent us. He led her to a secured section of the shipyard where alien technicians were installing systems that looked impossibly advanced. They call it a quantum resonance field generator. It creates a defensive barrier that can absorb energy weapons fire and redirect it back at attackers. How does it work? Torres asked. I have absolutely no idea, Rivera admitted with a grin. But they're teaching us to build them. Says it's their contribution to the cause of galactic freedom. The cause of galactic freedom. Torres had heard that phrase more and more often in recent months. The hegemony's war against humanity had awakened something across the galaxy, a recognition that the alliance of 7 species had grown too powerful, too willing to use extreme measures against anyone they viewed as a threat. Other species had begun to realize that if humans could be declared a contaminating influence and targeted for extermination, any of them could be next. Ma'am, Walsh said, we have a visitor requesting permission to come aboard. It's General Thex. Torres raised an eyebrow. The hegemony military commander requesting a meeting was unexpected. Is he alone? Yes, ma'am. Single ship, minimal escort. He's asking for a private conversation under flag of truce. Interesting. Grant permission, but keep security ready. An hour later, Torres found herself face to face with the alien general, who had orchestrated the destruction of human colonies. Thex looked older than she had expected, and there was something in his posture that suggested defeat. Admiral Torres, he said through his translator device, I come to discuss terms. What terms? Torres asked. Last I checked, your government's position was that humanity needed to be completely eliminated. The situation has changed, Thex replied carefully. The Hegemony Council has decided that a negotiated settlement may be preferable to continued conflict. Torres almost laughed. You mean you've decided that fighting us is more expensive than you expected? Among other considerations, yes. Thex activated a holographic display showing star charts. Human resistance has spread to 47 systems. Neutral powers are providing military support. The economic cost of continued warfare has become unsustainable. And the political cost, Torres added. Hard to maintain your image as protectors of galactic peace when everyone knows you're the ones who started this war. Thex was silent for a moment. The Council is prepared to offer significant concessions, reparations for destroyed colonies, territory grants for new human settlements, even representation in hegemony governance structures. In exchange for what? Acceptance of hegemony authority. Integration into our alliance structure. Essentially, you would become an 8th member species. Torres stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the ships under construction. She could see humans working alongside Cathara engineers, Centauri technicians, and free trader mechanics. The alliance that had formed around human resistance was bigger than just survival now. It was about something entirely different. General Thex, she said finally, do you know what Captain Cross said before the Battle of Tau Ceti? I was not informed of any final communications. He told his crew that they could surrender and hope for mercy they knew wouldn't come, or they could fight and show the galaxy what humans are made of. Torres turned back to face the alien commander. They chose to fight, and in doing so, they showed the galaxy something more important than human courage. What was that? They showed everyone what happens when ordinary people decide they won't accept tyranny, when they choose freedom over survival. Torres gestured toward the window. Look around, General. This isn't just a human fleet being built here. This is something new. Thex followed her gaze and seemed to understand for the first time what he was seeing. The shipyard wasn't just building human vessels, it was constructing the foundation of an entirely new political alliance. The Free Worlds Coalition, Torres continued. 12 species so far, with more joining every month, all of them united by one simple principle. No single alliance should have the power to decide which species deserves to exist. This is unacceptable, Thex said, his composure finally cracking. The hegemony has maintained galactic peace for centuries by crushing anyone who disagreed with you, Torres replied. But you made one crucial mistake, General. You picked the wrong species to try to exterminate. She activated her own holographic display, showing fleet movements across the galaxy. Humans don't just fight hard when we're cornered. We inspire others to fight alongside us. We build alliances. We turn enemies into friends and friends into family. The display showed the full scope of what had grown from the ashes of the Battle of Tau Ceti. Human resistance cells had evolved into joint military units with other species. Trade networks had become mutual defense pacts. Refugee camps had become the founding colonies of new worlds. "Your offer is rejected, General," Torres said formally. "Humanity will not accept membership in the hegemony under any terms." "Then the war continues," Thex warned. "Yes, it does. But it's not the same war anymore." Torres smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "You wanted to eliminate the human threat to galactic peace. Congratulations, General. You've succeeded. Beyond your wildest dreams." Thex looked confused. "I do not understand. The human threat you were so worried about? It never existed. We were just another species trying to find our place among the stars. But by attacking us, by trying to wipe us out, you created something much more dangerous." Torres walked closer to the alien general. "You created a species with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. You turned us into exactly the threat you claimed we already were. And now," she continued, "we're teaching that same lesson to every other species in the galaxy. The Free Worlds Coalition grows stronger every day, and it's growing because of the example you forced us to set." Thex was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke quietly. "What do you want?" "Complete hegemony withdrawal from all contested systems, reparations for war crimes, and formal recognition of the Free Worlds Coalition as an equal power in galactic politics." "Impossible. The Council will never agree to such terms." "Then they'll have to live with the consequences," Torres replied. "Because we're done being afraid of you. We're done hiding, and we're definitely done surrendering." She gestured toward the viewport again. "See that ship being built out there? The new Defiant? It's not just a replacement for the one you destroyed. It's a symbol. It tells everyone in the galaxy that humans don't give up. Ever. But more than that," she continued, "it's not being built by humans alone. Every species in our coalition contributed something to its construction. Every one of them has a stake in its success. When that ship flies, it carries the hopes of 12 different species who decided they'd rather stand with humans than kneel to the hegemony." Thex looked out at the shipyard with what might have been understanding. "You have built something new." "Captain Cross and his crew built it," Torres corrected. "We're just finishing what they started. 200 people who chose to die fighting rather than live as slaves. They lit a fire that spread across the galaxy, and now it's too big for you to put out." The alien general straightened his shoulders. "I will convey your terms to the Council." "You do that," Torres replied. "But General, while you're there, remind them of something. Remind them that humans have a saying, you can kill the revolutionary, but you can't kill the revolution." Thex left without another word, his ship disappearing into hyperspace within minutes of his departure. Torres watched it go, then turned her attention back to the construction around her. Captain Walsh approached with a new report. "Admiral, we just received word from the frontier sectors. 3 more species have requested membership in the coalition. The news of Thex's visit has already spread, and everyone wants to know what we told him." "What did we tell them?" Torres asked with a smile. "That humans don't surrender," Walsh replied, "and neither do our friends." Torres looked out at the stars and thought about Captain Cross and the crew of the original Defiant. They had died believing they were making a last hopeless stand against impossible odds. They couldn't have known that their sacrifice would change the balance of power across the entire galaxy. But perhaps that was the point. Perhaps the most important victories were won by people who fought not because they believed they could win, but because they believed the fight itself was worth the cost. The echoes of their defiance would ring across the stars for generations to come. And somewhere in those echoes, the future of galactic freedom was taking shape, one ship and one alliance at a time. The war was far from over. But for the first time since it began, humanity was not fighting alone. They had turned their darkest hour into the dawn of something new. A galaxy where freedom mattered more than power, and where the courage of 200 people on one doomed ship had become the foundation of hope for billions. The Defiant was gone, But its legacy lived on in every ship being built, every alliance being forged, and every species that chose to stand up rather than kneel down. That legacy would endure long after the last shots of the war were fired, a permanent reminder that sometimes the most important victory is simply refusing to accept defeat.